There you go. You're live.
You're live.
Hello, Women Up. Thank you for joining us today. I am delighted to be here. The conversation that we're going to have with one of my dearest friends, and I don't really want to say oldest friends, but to be perfectly frank, I started at CAR in 1984, and Annette Graw was one of the first realtors that I met. Joel introduced us, and over the years we have gotten to know each other incredibly well. I have the utmost respect for her. She has had the most interesting life. And I just want to say welcome, Annette. It's wonderful to see you and have you here.
Thank you.
You know, when we have like 5 different questions that we're asking the speakers that are coming in on Friday, and they're about leadership and challenges, and they were developed a month or 2 ago. And of course, since we talked about you being on the program, Annette, there have been a lot of changes, and certainly the murder of George Floyd has really changed the landscape quite a bit. So I'd love to start out really talking about kind of the twin pandemics that we're facing right now, and just get your sense, your overview of what's happening and what it looks like from your perspective, given your experience in the industry.
Well, before I started in the industry during the Watts riots, I actually was working as a bacteriologist at Children's Hospital. I was married to a doctor, and we didn't have children, and they cordoned off Los Angeles so that nobody could get in or out of any place. So we had no nurses, no orderlies, no janitors, nothing. The hospital basically had to run on the doctors and their wives and anybody who happened to live in the community. And, you know, we stayed up 3 or 4 nights feeding babies and things like that. I mean, that was very, very scary. But in a way, it was different because we were enclosed and we didn't see what was going on. And we didn't have TV like we do today. We certainly didn't have the internet. We didn't have instant videos. And one of the things I think, you know, the second thing was the Rodney King riots, which I remember because my son was graduating from USC at the time. And I have a picture of him as a proud Trojan standing next to a tank and shaking hands with a National Guardsman. So, I mean, that was that. But again, it wasn't the whole United States. And then, you know, when you live in California, you think Washington, D.C. is way back there. And, you know, and then when I moved to Washington, D.C. and I found out, you know, everything's happening right down the street, it was a whole thing to change. But this is different. This is a pandemic of, you know, I think moral and spiritual problems that we have to face. And you're reading about it now, but things are going to change. Things are going to change because of the viral pandemic, because we have been having to change for things. But I think today we're going to see changes. And I think one of the things that Joel Singer has, thank goodness, and Leslie's always taught us is, you know, you have to be nimble, you have to be ready to change, you have to be brave enough to change. And I think we're there.
So are you feeling optimistic about the changes that we can make now and what it will look like when we come out of this? Or I don't even know if come out of this is really the right way to say it, but you've been through a lot of these challenging times.
Well, but the thing is too about the challenging times is that you know, you're at different parts of your life and you have different concerns, you know. So certainly my concern when Bill was living on campus, and I ended up with 10 young men living in my house in Manhattan Beach before they could get airplanes out to go home because their parents wouldn't even let them come back to school. I mean, it's really interesting how here we are these number of years later, and you know, the campuses are closing down and all the things that we're going through. So I am optimistic only because I think there's been some changes made. I certainly, if you look around the California Association of Realtors, when I got there in 1976, it was predominantly men. It was predominantly older men. There weren't a lot of women. There certainly were not people of color, except for a few people like Evelyn Arnold, and you know, just a few people that stand out in my mind. But we've changed, and I think we've embraced things. And Yes, we started off with having all our little different groups, but I think these groups are coming together from a real estate perspective. And I think that's really, really, really important. It's, everything's just a step at a time, but the fact that we're willing to change is going to make all the difference.
So let me ask you for the people that don't know you, the few that might be on the call, to just give us some of the highlights of what were you doing when you got into real estate, because you've had just such an incredible career in the industry and outside of the industry. So if you could just kind of walk us through your experiences in various parts of the industry, I think that would be helpful.
Okay, well, like I said, I was a bacteriologist. I met my husband, who was a physician at Children's Hospital. He was chosen to go to the National Institutes of Health. So we were transplanted back there, and I had my 2 sons in Bethesda Naval Hospital because it was Vietnam and we were attached to the Navy. And when I was not quite 30, he decided he didn't want to be married anymore. And getting a divorce at that time in Maryland was pretty hectic. But I needed to get back here because my license in Maryland was not the same as my license here. So I came back and I bought a house because I had the money, and I bought my first house for $19,000, everybody.
Was it in Manhattan Beach?
Yes, but it was,
Wow.
it was 580 square feet, which is not as big as a 3-car garage, it was a very tiny little house. Anyway, but the boys and I lived there, and then I was still working at the hospital, which was absolutely impossible being a single parent, no childcare. And then Billy broke his arm when he was about 4, and I couldn't get home because I was running an experiment. And I said, that's it, I have to figure something else out. So my brother was the one that said, well, why don't you go into real estate and you can manage properties? Because I'd done that in Maryland for the church. And I said, okay. So I took my license, and I loved it. I mean, when I first got into business, I was so excited because it was new and it wasn't the hospital and all this stuff. And then I was lucky enough that people introduced me to CAR. I joined the board obviously in 74. And then I had a broker who told me, because the market was going bad, he said, when the market goes bad, 76, the market's going bad, you go get your broker's license. And I said, I don't need a broker's license. He said, you go get your broker's license. So that was my big thing. He was always, get that broker's license. So I got my broker's license, which meant at that time, believe it or not, that I could be on the board of realtors because you had to be a broker.
Now, yeah, a lot of people don't know that today, right?
Yeah. So you had to be a broker, and this is way before all realtor concept. So, there were Class A brokers, which are the ones who own companies, and there are Class B brokers like me who didn't own a company at the time. But it allowed me in 76, the association, we called it the Board of Realtors then, but we had a thing called the Young Realtors, and until you were 40, and I wasn't 40 yet. So I got to go to CAR as a young realtor. And so I started as a director for CAR in 1976, and everybody in my association, they went golfing and they went places, and I had nobody. I didn't know anybody outgoing. So I remember, some of my lifelong friends. One of the first people I've met was B.J. Johnson, who unfortunately isn't with us anymore. Mary Eileen Matthias, Shirley Collins Long, who is not with us anymore. Carolyn D'Augusta. We were sort of
so many names that are so familiar to me.
Yeah, well, so we were this group that basically was very, very interested from a younger person's and a female perspective, quite frankly. BJ was a real feminist, even though she wouldn't say she was, but she really felt
absolutely, yes,
had a voice. And she was very, very bright, and she was her own broker and just did really, really well. But she was one of the people too that said, okay, now you've got CAR behind you, you've got to be an NAR. So I would go to NAR, and then BJ and Carolyn and I and a whole group of us, many, many friends who are no longer with me, but people like Dee Prado Keltner now, who I'm still lifelong friends with, of course, because of those things.
As am I.
When you first came, one of the things I realized about the association is that Joel has always said, we have staff and we have clients, which, are the members. But on the other hand, the staff and the volunteers need to mesh together. And so it was really important to me to get to know the people who were going to be, I was going to be working with. So, every time somebody was new, I'd say to Joel, I always kidded Rick Schumacher, who everybody knows with the gray hair. When he came to CAR, he was 24 years old and he had dark, dark black hair. And
Yes,
so
he
when
did.
I turned 48, I said, I've known you half your life.
Yeah,
So-
well, you guys were the original Women Up, and I still remember that. And I remember this kind of feeling like you reached out to me, and Colette Johnson Schulke reached out to me, and Pat Stitzenberger reached out to me. And it was like getting in this little cocoon of women that kind of knew how it worked and weren't afraid to get up and speak. And I just remember being so impressed and supported by all of you.
Well, and then, because of that, because I really felt a lot more confidence, I think, when I went from a small company back to a large franchise, and I was in management for them. And then all of a sudden, my boss said, well, we want you to start teaching. And I was like, oh, something I never wanted to do in my whole life. That's why I was a bacteriologist, not a teacher. Anyway, but I learned it. I loved it. And I've been teaching since 79. I've been in management since 79. And, I went through a company, a huge corporation, 27 offices in the state of California that became, Remax of California eventually. Didn't stay there for a number of different reasons. Went to another small company. And then I met my two former partners. And, we used to have to sprint across Sepulveda, which is a busy highway, to even get to the coffee shop because our broker didn't have a copier. Of course, this is before computers, before fax machines. Nobody understands that, you wrote an offer, you took your piece of paper, you went and saw Leslie, and then you had to go see the other person she was buying with on the same piece of paper. I mean, it wasn't like it is today.
Yeah, yeah.
So, and I have some funny stories about having to chase one of my sellers who was a judge all over LA country clubs, golf course, and him being so mad at me. And all I said was Moya, that was his wife. I said, Moya sent me. And he went, rah, rah, and told the marshal, get her out of here.
So definitely as you've grown in the industry, you've taken on bigger and bigger roles. So I want to just talk a little bit about leadership and how you see that today, and what are the challenges that are being faced by leaders today?
Well, I mean, the thing about being in leadership is that the advantage of being involved, and that's what I say is leadership is, it's getting involved. I don't care where you are in the committee. If you're on the committee, even if you're not a member of the committee, you can go to the committees if they're not closed, becoming involved and looking at the whole array of what is available. And learning. Every single time I would go to CAR, I'd come home with a new idea. I'd come home with something I wanted to do different. And, when we started our company, which was really, it was not planned. We bought a building. Our broker thought—
The South Bay Brokers.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I want to just point that out to everybody listening. I mean, WomenUp was really founded on the gap between the share of female agents and the share of female brokers. And here you were. When was South Bay Brokers established?
Well, we started in 85.
1985. So that you are a pioneer.
And I
in
was
so many ways.
I was one of the first owners. There's some of us, Sharon Bowler, people like that were in that kind of management role. But no, I think the thing is that it's just a funny story, and we made all the mistakes you could ever make. And I teach a broker class where I talk about this. But it just was, we bought the building. Our broker assumed we were starting a company, which wasn't true. And so he fired me. And then I went and told him, I said, you can't fire me. I'm a broker, 60-day notice. But if you give me my E&O, which we had to pay him, in the beginning of the year, I said, if you give me my E&O back, I'll go, which I did. And then he fired my two former partners at about the same time. So we started doing all the TI for this building over the Christmas holiday. And we literally opened with sawdust and contractors. And there was just going to be 5 of us. And it was fabulous. And we had this beautiful space. It was lovely with, etched glass windows and oak and all this beautiful stuff. And then I'll never forget one of my former partners, Jim Van Zandt, became board president that year. We're in San Diego, and he comes up to me and he goes, you want the good news or the bad news? And I said, oh, I think I want the good news. And he said, well, the good news is we have 17 people coming over on Monday. And I'm like, where are we going to put them? We didn't have any room.
You mean as in new agents?
No, these are people from established companies. Because one of the things that happened—
No, but I mean new agents for you guys. You had recruited them?
Because we didn't ever have, there was Jack and his dad, there was our manager, there was me, Jim, and then a wonderful woman, Pam Petrel, who we'd known for years and years. That was South Bay Brokers for the first 6 months. And then we just like leapfrogged. And so—
Were you scared to death?
Well, it was like, where are we going to get the money from? This is 85. You never would start a company in such a bad market. But in a way, it's sort of, but it was little things. Like I remember going and presenting in those days. You presented an offer to the seller and the agent. I go to see the agent, and they say, "Oh, we're going to fax the counter to you." And I'm screaming back to the office because we didn't have a fax machine yet. So we're going to Best Buy to buy this fax machine. Was huge. It was one of those old fax machines with the phone on it, and the paper would come out, and if you didn't go copy it immediately, it would disappear. It was comedy time.
So, Annette, in your position, I know that you have people coming to you as one of them for advice and direction and insight. What kind of questions are people asking you now, and where do you direct them? What kind of resources are there out there to help people cope right now?
You know what I am saying to everybody, and there's a lot of women that I have kept in contact with, even though I was out of the company or they were out of the company or whatever's going on, because real estate changes. But I mean, the biggest thing is that I am trying to tell people, you've got to get your facts straight. You've got to get really good facts, which I say are going to be from CAR and from NAR. And then, when some of the new MLS stuff comes out, I mean, oh my gosh, the coming soon and all that. I mean, I must have had a phone call a day about, what are we going to do? This is horrible. And I'm like, why? What does it say? Well, I said, no, don't tell me what you think it says. Go back, start getting into the classes in the MLS and start reading everything. Our associations, the CAR and NAR, they give us something every single morning. And most people don't even bother to look at it. And that just drives me nuts. So, I tell my classes, one of the first things, I'm a very early riser. First thing I do in the morning is I get up and I do my little thing as far as spiritual stuff. And then I do a real cursory look at CAR, NAR, and I look at just my emails to see if there's any fires. And then I leave and go work out. And then I come back to work type thing. But, every morning there's a nugget on CAR. And it may not be about COVID, but right now, this whole confusion about all the forms we had to have and the changes and why the changes. And so I think that, the brokers who are doing well are the ones that are taking the information from CAR and bringing it back to their troops, But,
so which brings me to the next topic, and that's communication, right? And you kind of mentioned there's all this stuff coming out, but sometimes people don't read and we don't connect. And here you are teaching and a resource for people. What tips do you have for us in terms of like getting the message across?
Well, I think first of all, you have to really be informed yourself. But second of all, you really have to, I think, decide that you are going to be an expert. And the way you're going to be an expert is to get a lot of education and read up on it. And then you've got to sometimes you have to have the courage to say to somebody, that's not exactly what's going on, or that's not what's going to work, or, even to try something new. I'm amazed. I'm watching my daughter-in-law, Molly, who's a broker for 20 years. I mentored her way back.
Which I cannot even believe, but there it is.
Yeah, well, my grandsons are almost 17 and almost 16. So, and she's just done fabulously well. And one of the reasons is because she's always been an early adapter. So she looked into a lot of things that were going on that we weren't using. And she said, have you ever seen this virtual staging? And I'm thinking, what do we need virtual staging for? Well, when COVID hit, boom. Staging, no. She had 2 great listings, 1 closed, thank goodness. One is, she's still showing and praying, but that one, which is a big, beautiful condo, but empty, and just, you couldn't figure out what it was. So she did virtual staging. She's done virtual open houses. It's not, here's the living, whatever. She's showing you the surround sound, and she's showing that you could have your TV on either wall because it's plumbed for it, those kinds of things. So she's done really, really well. Now there's other people that I'm working with just within, my own group that are just going, poor, poor, pitiful me. And that isn't going to work right now. But sometimes we find when we have things like this is when people have to make up their mind whether they want to learn new, go forward, or it's okay to say you want to retire. I mean, and some people do want to retire. And if you want to retire and you can retire, hats off to you.
Well, when I think of you as an educator first above everything else. And I think that's really the theme as I look through your life. It's like you're always learning, you're always pushing yourself, and you're kind of the queen of reinventing who you are. Could you just share with us a little bit? You went back to school and got a degree in theology, which I think is amazing. Could you just maybe share a few of those moments or of those experiences that you had reinventing yourself?
Well, one of the things that happened is that my partners decided that, there should be two of them instead of three of us. And so, unfortunately, we didn't have a really good buy-sell agreement already done. So, we ended up having a little divorce, and I was able to take some of the money that I had into the company and everything. And I went back to Loyola Marymount, which was a fabulous experience. It was a fabulous experience, except I was doing a lot of real estate. So I did real estate in the morning, like triage. And then I, did afternoon going to classes. And so I finished my master's in 3 years in theology, because I always thought maybe I wanted to be a professor, or, obviously I want to know more. I'm very, very involved in the Episcopal Diocese of Los Angeles, wanted to know more there. Didn't know if I had a vocation as a deacon, all these things I was thinking about. And so for me, it was a great transition, and then of course, then my company in 2014, so I get my degree in 2014, and I'm still part of South Bay Brokers at the time. It's gone. It's sold. It went to a Sotheby's franchise or ownership or whatever. And I have to say that was probably a really big part of, it was almost like the death of a child to see the logos and everything and our signs. And, we had the highest sales volume per agent in LA County for 21 years, because we had all really, really good agents. And I was very proud of that, because we really spent a lot of time educating and making sure they did things right. And, so that was a big transition. But, now I've learned that, my clients still love me, and they, I get these funny little things like, well, we know where you are. We're not going to sell right now, Annette, but you're still on our list.
Right.
They're like me. I mean, I'm not going to sell. Where am I going to go? So.
No, as I say in my talk, sometimes you're part of the problem.
No, I am.
You've been in your house for too long.
I have a fabulous neighborhood. I love all my neighbors. Our neighborhood has changed just enough now that we have that's a 1.5-year-old and a 3.5-year-old. We have a 5-year-old across the street who's just the most amazing young woman, who is artistic and kind. And she made everybody painted rocks for Easter morning. So you could have, you went out and you got your rock, just this great kid, did big signs, thank you, first responders, all that. So we have great neighbors. And most people don't realize this, I'm bi-coastal too, because I have a whole entire family in a house in Annapolis, Maryland. And that's because my son ended up going back to finish high school in Annapolis. He ended up going to college in Annapolis. And what usually happens when you go to college, you meet somebody in Annapolis. And so the moment that Melanie and Bob decided they were going to get married, I decided I was going to buy something so that I could have my place. We call it Nana's Cottage.
You're always on the go.
Well, I am, except it's really sad because I haven't been back there since Christmas. Yeah. And it's very difficult. I mean, my youngest great-grandchild is 2, and I haven't seen her since Christmas, and she's totally changed. I see the pictures and I go, is that Malloy?
Yeah. No, I think this year has not turned out how anybody expected.
No, I was going to Italy for some of my life. I was ever going to take 30 days out of the country with a really good friend, and we were seeing friends, and we were just, no big cities, just going to Airbnbs and friends and traveling, and that's gone. I was 3 trips out of Maryland, gone.
Life interrupted. One of the things that really a theme throughout all this, starting in the 70s, has been your engagement with organized real estate. And I wondered if you talk just a little bit about that, because there just seems to be so much giving back, and kind of what motivates your passion to stay engaged, and how do you feel about Women Up in that context?
Well, one of the things, I mean, I was really basically not raised by religious parents, but I was raised with this concept that you gave back. And, those who have much need to give back and do things. So I've always volunteered. And, and then when I got in organized real estate, I also realized there were all these other things that realtors could be a part of the community and do. I became a planning commissioner. Why? Because when we got our new director of community development, the city stole 45 open house signs from my company, my offices, which were $40 to get back. And this is in the 70s. That was a lot of money. And corporate said, well, go out there and change things. And I went, okay. So she's still a really good friend. Got to know the new director of community development. We changed this is before the state changed the off-sign premises signs, your open house lead-ins. We changed it for Manhattan. Well, we have 29 municipalities in my little area. So we had to go through, the realtors went through and talked to city councils and said, we really need these signs. And remember, this is when the market started to go bad. And then there was a proliferation of signs all over. And we had communities that said, oh no, we're not going to have it. You can't even have a for sale sign. Well, then realtors went to CAR. We went to to our legislative branch and said, here's our story. And that's when, we got legislation. I mean, there's a great Q&A, can signs be legislated? The answer is yes, but they have things they have to follow. And that was a realtor product, working with our lobbyists, but listening to realtors all over California, because it's so different, So that's a thing when you see, the same thing we all know the TDS, right? Well, how did we get the transfer disclosure statement? Well, Easton versus Strasburger comes out. Every company in California had their own disclosures. Every company's attorneys. Chaos. Again, we went back to the legislative family, and they were great. They got the TDS through, which is actually, if you open 1102 of the Civil Code, it's right there. It's a law.
Right.
It can only be changed by the legislature, which is a problem. But we were a part of that. And I think when you go back and, what I worry about the most for new people coming in is my knowledge is cumulative, and I appreciate that. But real estate is really experiential. So you have to get in. But if you're not being involved, you're going, why do I have this other form? I don't want to do this form. Because why do we have that other form? Because otherwise you can't show the house.
Right. Well, what kind of advice would you have for any of the women listening in today in terms of running their own brokerage and being leaders? I mean, I think you've learned a lot of lessons the hard way. Do you have anything to share from that perspective?
I think, if you're coming, depending where you're coming out of, when you think you want to become a broker, I wish I had sat down and, well, I did, and everything was so secretive in those days. I wish I'd had the guts to talk to some of my really good friends who were male brokers at the time and said, hey, we're sort of thinking of doing this, or, we bought a building, now we're being what kind of advice? Because after the fact, I got a lot of advice.
Right. It was too late.
It was too late, but I mean, a lot of things have happened. I mean, like, one time we recruited somebody that we thought was a great person, and then he just turned out to be a huge problem. And then, I started hearing from my broker friends around, oh my God, we had him for only 2 weeks and that. Well, I mean, now, because of CAR, working with the DRE, we have a way to get rid of the bad apples. We can,
right.
You can, I mean, people don't want to do it, but there is a mechanism, being a realtor, where I can complain against another broker, or we can go to mediation, or whatever we have to do. But there are those things. But most people go, oh, I can't do it. So whatever, there are ways.
Yeah. So one of the things I want to talk just a little bit more about is you talked about your morning routine. Mm-hmm. And do you want to expand on that, or is there anything you want to add in terms of just coping? I mean, everybody's pretty stressed out and anxious, and it's just a tough time all the way around. How do you put it together to have a great day?
Well, one of the things I do, I mean, is I get up in the morning and I think about all of the things I have to be thankful for. And during COVID, I got to tell you, living alone, not getting to see people. My son said, "You will not go. We'll grocery shop for you. You know, you're not leaving the house." I didn't leave the house essentially for almost 2 months, and I found it very isolating. And particularly because all my young neighbors are out there on the street. I live in a 3-story house, so I'm up above everything. I can see everything. But I mean, they're out there having their wine at night at 5, and they're not social distancing. And of course, that was just before they said mask. But nobody wears mask. I go on my walk with a mask, and nobody else wears a mask. But
Yeah.
Billy, my son, sent me a great Johnny Wooden circle of what I can control and can't control. That great thing.
Right.
This was about COVID. And one of the things that's outside the circle is if somebody wears a mask or doesn't, that's beyond my control. All these things that you've got to give up and stop thinking about. So for me, my faith is very important. I'm being Episcopalian, and I'm also a associate of the Order of the Holy Cross, which is a male Anglican monastery. It's in Santa Barbara. So I mean, I do my lessons and things like that, which most people who are involved do something like that. But I think you have to just find something. Like you gave me a great book, Awakenings, which I still use all the time. I go back to it, not so much in the morning, but I go back to it sometimes during the day, and just think about other things. And now you can meditate online. You can get all these little apps. I mean, it's great, but first of all, I learned the hard way in 85 because I became very sick because I ignored my health. You can get very sick if you ignore your health. Ignoring it doesn't make it go away, trust me. So that was a real wake-up call. And after that, I decided I had to change, which is why I got into, I have a phone that says, okay, it's been an hour and a half, get up and move. It says, but it's just, you've got to think about taking care of you, because I know you can start at 9 a.m. on your computer and, all of a sudden it's 5 o'clock at night and you're like, what happened? Where did the day go? So I think it's really important that we learn to take care of ourselves. And then it's very important that we reach out and, sometimes just giving somebody an attaboy or, listening to somebody can make all the difference in the world, because we all need sounding boards. And I do too, so.
Right. No, that's beautiful advice. I guess the last topic I want to broach with you is just being a broker and being in a world that is pretty male dominated. We've talked about, there are lots of women selling real estate, but there aren't that many women who get their broker's licenses and so on. And now we have WomenUP, and we have a language to talk about what that looks like when you are invisible or you don't have a room at the table and all those things. But looking back, how did you do that back then when that really wasn't? I mean, you were truly a pioneer. I mean, there wasn't a way to communicate about that kind of reality back then.
When I got involved on the board of realtors, I mean, the first thing that sort of gave me insight was that I was a young realtor and I got to go to CAR. So that opened my world there.
Right.
And then I started to think about, well, what are some of the other things I can do? But what I learned in my own association, my board at the time, is, I had to be everything twice. And then I got to move up. So I was the first woman president for the South Bay Board of Realtors in 1980. And then I got co-opted into doing 81. Never do 2 terms as a president, by the way. That's one of my rules from now on. But I was the first president in 1980. For realtors who I actually met was a wonderful woman named Dorothy Kerr, 1953. So one of the things I did was to say to people that I knew that were brokers, you've got to get involved with the board. And, they'd all go, oh, those old man. And I said, well, the only way we're going to change is to change. And, so people, our association now, South Bay Association of Realtors, is really the amalgamation of a number of boards through those years. Because when when I was regional chair, we had 8 boards in the 21st district. 8. I had 8 sets of keys lockbox keys being a broker. But now you look around and you see women really are stepping up and they're learning to use their tools. But part of it is you just got to make sure that you know what you're talking about.
Right.
And, I mean, some people don't really want to hear what you're going to say, and you just have to try to couch it very well and listen to the naysayers. And then after they've had their say, I hear you, I understand what you're saying, but I really believe this is the way forward.
I just want to say, just knowing you all these years, just how important you have been to so many of us, not just me. And, I look at the WomenUp community that's been evolving over the last 4 or 5 years. And I just think it's such a beautiful thing to actually have a name and a program and a platform. And we didn't really have that all those years, but we kind of created it on our own. And I think one of the things that really kind of exemplifies that, and you kind of touched on it, was just this idea of they're the volunteers and here's the staff and never the twain shall meet. And the reality is that even those barriers have to come down, and the business and the personal life. And I just want to kind of mention, I know many people on the call know that I was in an alcoholic marriage for a long, long time. And Annette has experience with that world and was just amazing in terms of calling me up and asking how I'm doing and giving me advice way before I was at a point where I could take the advice. But it was just a really incredible thing. And I just thank you for just being kind of a beacon in my life.
Oh, you're welcome. But again, one of the reasons I could call you up and talk about that is because I had gone through that in my own family. And, I needed a way for me to learn to cope with what was going on. And so, my broker, who was amazing, he used to take me to AA meetings because he was in AA. And then he used to make me go to Al-Anon because I needed it, So, I would go and at first I was like, but everything you do, you learn some way how to handle things. And thank goodness everything is fine now. And it's just, it's really difficult when you're going, but I think if you really just understand, you have the tools if you'll use them. And, I had a mother who was amazing woman, don't get me wrong. But for her, the glass was always half empty. And we used to have these arguments because I would say, the glass is half full. And she'd say, no, it's half empty. And I'd say, well, you know what, if it's half empty, you could fill it up. She didn't like that, but that was my attitude.
Annette, that's absolutely beautiful. I think we're almost out of time. I think that's just a beautiful way to end it, unless you have any last thoughts that you'd like to share.
No, it's just it's so important. I've had 2 or 3 people introduced to me, and they want to get involved, and they want to know how to get involved. And I told them, I said, the first thing you do is you find your passion. What are you interested in? Are you interested in local government? Are you interested in the planning commission? Are you interested in something else? I was president of the South Bay Free Clinic for too many years to mention, but what was your passion? What could you do? And I have to tell you, going out and being involved in that community means that people see you not just as the realtor, not just as somebody who's money grabbing, you got to give back. So figure out what that is, and then look and see at CAR's level, what is that you like to, if you're an event planner, sign up for Reimagine. If you love doing that kind of thing, sign up for that. It's amazing. We have so much talent, and we just have to figure out where we can put it.
Right. And just ask the questions. And here we have this whole network of people that are here to support you and answer the questions. And I think the other thing I just wanted to say is, whatever troubles you're having, the worst thing to do is to be silent about it. And maybe it just starts with a one-on-one conversation between us, and then eventually you build your confidence and you're able to move on. But just to have a safe place to voice a secret that you just don't know what to do with is just an incredible gift to give to another human being. And I see that happening between so many of the women I know, and it's really lovely.
No, it's really important, and it's really important to have a sounding board. I mean, I have many friends, and you're one of them, where I can say, "What do you think of this?" or "What do you think of that?" or "What do you think happened?" or and and I know if I say this is confidential, it's confidential, and I don't
Absolutely.
And one of the problems in my community right now, we just have these rumor mills, and they're just. I mean, I have attached myself from so much in social media in the last 2 or 3 weeks, just because they're just rumor mills, and I'm so upset about it. So that's why I say, get your information, but make sure you're getting your information from a reliable source.
And plus, I think the other thing is just in terms of I always can count on the truth from you. And I think that's the trust factor. And I still remember back in the day when I was so stuck and you said something like, Leslie, you might have to change the locks on your house. And I remember I was so far away from ever even conceiving of that concept. And eventually I didn't do that, but I mean, I freed myself, but it just was a wonderful thing to just get that honest take from you. It was a lifeline.
Yeah, well, and you've been a good friend. And I mean, we have so many good friends that I think the nice thing about, if anything's coming out of this, it's good, is that we've been doing Zooms with friends that live all over. I stay involved because I have friends from Humboldt all the way down to, the San Diego border. I would miss all those people, but since we keep be together, we've been, visiting, and, I mean, we've been through a lot. I mean, one of our good friends is going to be a grandma for the first time. And so, we're going to be part of that. So that's what I say about CAR being a family. I mean, we've really been through a lot together. So, but it's worth it.
Oh, Annette, thank you for the wonderful interview. Just give me like 2 minutes. I have just a few other things I need to say in terms of business. And that is, Deborah's going to put in the chat the link to the videos from Inman this week. And WomenUp just had 2 fabulous panels this week that were just off the charts. I encourage anyone that wasn't there, that's an Inman subscriber, to watch them. And then I gave a presentation where I kind of brought together a broker survey, a consumer survey, and an agent survey to talk about what the last 2.5 months have looked like, and whether or not you're in the Inman group, those slides will be available to everyone. And I'll also have a brief economic update. We're gonna post the weekly numbers so you can see what's been happening to closed sales, pendings, and new listings around the state for the last 10 or 11 weeks. We also have the updated unemployment slides, and that was big news this morning, where we got unexpectedly not as negative news about the economy, with instead of an 8 million jobs lost, we actually had 2.5 million jobs added, bringing the unemployment rate down to 13.3%. And what's even better for us is that we've revised our forecast for this year. So instead of a drop of 16.7% for the year as a whole, we're seeing it reduced to 12.7%. And the median price for the year will be around 586,000. I know, Annette, for your market, that's a garage, but a drop instead of 3.7, a drop of 1.1. So things are better. These stay-at-home orders are loosening up, and people are gradually getting back to business in a very safe way. But there are, record low mortgage rates, as everybody knows, and you've got buyers and sellers that have been on the sidelines, ready to talk to a realtor. So with that, it's just been delightful to talk to you today, Annette. Thank you for being on. And it's great to see everybody. And please join us again next Friday at 2:00 Pacific time with Deborah and Sarah, and we'll be back with more great discussions, talking it out. Thank you very much. Bye, everybody.
Bye.